As a young child, I always enjoyed playing with my dolls as many young girls do. Now, at the age of 16, I wish I could have found out more about my experience and maybe some explanations as to why it happened to me. I don't remember much from when I was in my primary school years, but this was certainly one that I remember as if it were yesterday. There was a sale that took place in the hall of my school around the year 2007. There were many unwanted toys that had been brought in by children's parents, none of which seemed to catch my eye. I was never a lover of shiny, new-looking toys, which is what the majority of them were. After a good rummage through the piles of items, I eventually stumbled across a ragged-looking doll. The doll itself wasn't porcelain or made from any kind of plastic material, but instead it was a soft, crocheted doll that looked fairly mistreated and had a lot of stitches torn from its mouth and dress. I was thrilled at the fact I had another doll to add to my collection. I had no suspicions of the doll at this time as being particularly strange or abnormal. When I got home that afternoon, I placed the doll on my bed, and for the first couple of weeks or so, nothing out of the ordinary happened. As I began to collect more and more toys, I gradually started to remove certain toys that had been on my bed for some time. Although Lucy, the doll, was my favorite at this time, I had to move her to a large wooden box that I had kept a lot of my other toys in. That night, I settled down with a Disney video. I was beginning to drift to sleep when I noticed something was poking from the top of my toy box that was just to the right of my bed. It was Lucy. It seemed to stand on both its legs, arms side by side, with an unusual facial expression that was unoriginal to the doll, almost like it was smirking. I did not feel threatened by the doll, and I continued to stare at the doll for a few seconds, until, unexpectedly, the doll seemed to physically jump from one side of the box to the other. I rushed to the box, only to find Lucy laid flat at the top of the pile and motionless. Since then, I have now moved in with my grandma and have no current recollection of the doll's whereabouts, but I suspect it may still be somewhere within my mom's house.
So this is a story my aunt told me when I was younger. It is one that has always stuck with me because I am always paranoid about being in a creepy situation and think of what I would do if confronted with someone who could potentially hurt me. The event took place when I was a toddler. I am 22 now. For a little background, my dad travels occasionally for work, and at the time he was put on a project in Alaska. We live in Texas, so my mother and I stayed home at our house in Texas for most of the time my dad was on this project, but went to stay with him for a few months. It is during this period of time that the event took place. My aunt had just graduated college and was staying in our house while we were away, watching over things and such. One weekend, her friend from college, Julie, had invited my aunt to go out with a group of people she had met in graduate school. While out, my aunt met this guy that was part of the group. He kinda stuck around her, and as the night was ending, he mentioned he had an extra ticket to a collegiate football game that other people in the group, including Julie, were going to the following day, and asked her if she wanted to go. My aunt took him up on this offer and gave him our address so that he could pick her up. He comes by for her around 10 AM the next day, and they went to a tailgate before the game started. The whole group of friends was at the tailgate, but when it was time to go into the game, everyone's tickets were not all together, so now she is partnered off with this guy. While there, she learned more about him and found out he had just gotten out of serving for the United States Navy, meaning he was a large guy, and was just getting back into school. After the game, he took her to a country music bar grill type of place. She realized she did not have any cash and the guy never offered to buy her food, so they didn't ever eat dinner, and she was getting pretty hungry by the end of the night. He eventually brings her home to our house, and she is thinking he was nice, but is not interested in going on a second date with him. He asks her if he can come in to use the restroom, which annoyed her a tad, because it is 1 AM at this point, so she is tired and extremely hungry. But she figured she could get rid of him pretty quickly, so she let him in. To get to the restroom on the first floor of our house from the front door, you have to walk through our living room and kitchen, passing the dining room, laundry room and entrance to the garage, so you get a solid idea of the entire first floor layout. While he was in the restroom, my aunt waited near the front door in our living room, so that he would be encouraged to head out the door immediately after he was done. However, when he came back toward the front of the house, he went and sat on the couch in the living room instead. Even more annoyed at this point, my aunt goes to sit at the opposite end of the couch, on the edge, as to not look like she is getting comfortable. They are just chatting, and he mentions he loves to read and is an avid reader who cannot even go to bed without reading. She asks him what type of books he likes to read, and he says he likes reading about warfare and serial killers. The mood in the room shifts at this point as he starts talking about how fascinated he is with serial killers, especially Ted Bundy. My aunt was getting seriously creeped out as he goes on and on about Bundy. He was very animated about the whole thing, like he was really passionate about the topic. He talked about how it was estimated Bundy killed about 20 women a year and had been doing it for many years, and how all of his victims had similar characteristics. Then he goes on to say, and the funny thing is that you fit those characteristics perfectly. With that, alarm starts majorly going off in her head, and it comes to a climax when he says, "I mean, your hair is the right colour, and the way you part it a little off the centre to the left is just right." At that point, she feels all the blood drain from her face, and she can't hear exactly what else he says. He continues talking about the characteristics she shares with Bundy's victims. She zones out and scans the room to see if she could escape the situation. At this point, he knows the layout of the first story of the house. She looked for the house phone and sees it's on an end table behind his side of the couch, so that option is shut, and she knows she could never make it to the front door before this 6'2" Navy-trained potential psycho got a hold of her. She then looks down at the floor and can only think that her sister, my mother, is going to come home to her body with the blood all over the white carpet. She prayed that if she was going to die that night, that it would be quick. Call it divine intervention or whatever you'd like, but at that point this wave of calm fell on her and she was able to very calmly speak. She told him that she was getting really tired and was hungry, and it was probably time for him to go. He made a comment along the lines of, "Oh, this has probably been a weird conversation for a first date, huh?" She just kind of shook her head and followed him to the door, keeping a healthy amount of distance between them. He opens the door but stops at the threshold to say that he would call her the following day and that he had a nice time. Then he looked up the stairwell, which you would have a good view of from the front door, and said, "It's really looked dark up there," and asked, "Do you ever get scared staying there by yourself?" She quickly thought to say, "No, the neighbours here are really attentive. I guarantee they have already seen your truck out front and have definitely been keeping tabs on when I come and go. It is almost annoying." This was a complete lie, but was believable enough. He said goodbye and shut the door, and she immediately locked the bolts behind him. Terrified, she runs upstairs to my parents' bedroom, which has 2 windows overlooking the front yard and street. She watches him get in the car and leave. She grabs for the phone that is at my parents' bedside and immediately called a couple of friends to see if they could stay with her the night, but neither could. So she sat up nearly all night to see if he would return. The following day, her dad, my grandfather, came over, and lo and behold, the guy calls the house. She had my grandfather answer it, and he then passed it over to her. When the guy asked who answered the phone, she told him it was her father and that he was staying with her for a couple of weeks while renovations were being done to his house. The renovation part was true, but it was a lie that he was staying there. He told her he would call her again later and they hung up. She never heard from him again. So that is how my aunt got into a potentially deadly situation in my house. I cannot say if he was just very awkward and did not know how to have a appropriate date conversation, behavior, or if he actually had bad intentions and just didn't follow them out. It's always creeped me out that he could have easily come back at any time, and it could have been when just my mother and I were there or something. I'm just glad that my aunt thought quickly and was able to get herself out of a super creepy situation.
All throughout high school, there was a teacher who I referred to as Creepy Creep. He deserved this name, and throughout this story I hope you can understand why. It all started in my freshman year. This teacher was an inclusion teacher, meaning he was in charge of taking care of the special needs kids that were allowed to be in the same classes as everyone else. Creepy Creep always seemed alone and I always felt bad for him, so one day I complimented him on his haircut. I always regretted doing this because ever since, he was always in the same place as me. Later in my freshman year, I had broken my toe at a haunted house. After I came to school for the first time after I broke it, he stopped me in the hallway to tell me I should avoid haunted houses. I just laughed it off, but later it hit me. It was really odd that he knew how I broke my toe because I hadn't actually told anyone at school. The next school year, he would always sit with me at my lunch table until my friends showed up. That same year he was running up the stairs and accidentally tripped, which I just happened to see. He seemed fine until he noticed I was one of the students who saw. He started crying and later that day he sat with me at lunch, apologizing that he never wanted to embarrass himself like that in front of me. My junior year, he gave me this huge hug on the first day telling me how much he missed me over the summer. This year he would always sit with me at lunch even after my friends would show up. He said my friends weren't true friends if they had a problem with us sitting together. One day at lunch I was talking about how I was leaving early for a dentist appointment. He asked what time I was leaving and I said right after lunch. Then a few minutes later he left, which I was honestly so grateful for. Once I got to my car to leave, it wouldn't start. Creepy Creep just happened to be out there though and offered to give me a ride home. I told him it was fine because my stepdad was on his way to get me and anyways he had to get back to school. Creepy Creep told me it wouldn't take any time for him to take me home since my house was just down the road. That's when I got really freaked out because he knew where I lived. Luckily my stepdad showed up just in time. Creepy Creep actually introduced himself to my stepdad, saying it was nice to finally meet the man who raised such a beautiful girl. My senior year I ended up going to a different school and I got a new job as a delivery driver. About a week into the job there was a special note on the bottom of the delivery saying bring to the back of the door and you can just walk in. Which wasn't too odd to me because sometimes that's a common note on delivery for elderly people who can't make it to the door. So I made it to the back and went inside, but it was none other than Creepy Creep. When I walked in, he went in for a kiss telling me how much he missed me. I was so terrified because not only was this my creepy stalking teacher, but he had also just kissed me. He told me how upset he was to not hear from me on our 2-year anniversary, but he said he understood because it's hard to keep in touch after being at different schools. He asked me to quit my job and just stay with him for the rest of the day so we could celebrate our anniversary the proper way. Luckily, my boss called yelling at me for taking so long on my delivery, so I told Creepy Creep that I had to go quit my job in person so I wouldn't get in trouble for keeping the money from his delivery, then I would come right back. He was so happy and said he was so excited to see me putting more effort into our relationship. So I quit my job and then went straight home and told my parents everything. I also haven't heard from Creepy Creep ever again. So sorry for lying, Creepy Creep, but let's not meet ever again.
This was 2 years ago when I was 19 years old. I'm a traveler by heart, and I love to try new things. I was in China for 2 weeks with a tourist group of about 12 people, and I didn't know most of them, all from America. I knew one guy who happened to be my Kung Fu instructor. Or, as I should say, Sifu. Sifu means teacher in Chinese, and he was fairly aged, about 37. His dad was very old, and lived in China, and is a very popular man in his town, and teaches the local police force, and even sometimes military. So let's get past these introductions, and on to the story. Literally a day before we left China, we visited a clothing shop that was owned by someone of our friends knew. We go there and all get free clothing and discounts. So I take off my jacket, which had my wallet and passport, and put it on a hanger. I try it on and take a picture with my group, and then I go back inside. I put on my jacket and then we head to lunch in our convoy that our instructor's dad set up for us. I ate food and I noticed one thing. I'm patting my pants down, my jacket pockets, looking around my seat. Someone asked me if everything was okay, and I calmly say, I lost my wallet. Maybe it's in the convoy car. Nothing there. After a few hours, we finally hear back from the store. They went through the surveillance tape and called us up. They shared the recording with us, and what I seen gave me a slight feeling of anger and the creeps. 2 very well-dressed men in the store by themselves, just standing there, with no physical interest in any clothing around them. Now, one man is standing a bit near the door and sort of blocking the potential sight of anyone coming back in to see the other man. The other man quickly goes into my pocket, but no one else's pocket or belongings. They just went straight for my stuff. That's what gave me the creeps. I enjoy the last day of my trip, and I'm literally walking all over the place to see if I can find that guy again with his picture in hand. Nothing. So the next day, my tourist group leaves and I am forced to stay behind because I have no exit visa or a passport. They all gave me a few hundred yuan and wished me luck in China as they went into the airport. I went back with my instructor's family and decided to stay one more night in my fancy hotel before I took my invite to their home. It's late at night and I'm in the hotel lobby room, which has huge front glass doors and a main street in the front of it. I peer outside and I know I seen the guy from the store who stole my stuff drive past and look at me. The next day, my instructor's brother, who was an ex-detective with a good but very small understanding of English, took me to the police department to file the thief. I know, it took us long to report this. Soon I was a suspect for staying in China past my visa. So I'm in the department for hours getting my fingerprints checked and my mugshots took. Eventually, they let me leave and I go to the US Embassy and I got my emergency passport. I got my exit visa on cue, but I was literally told to wait 2 weeks before it was eligible and accessible. I figured it was too long, and I didn't want to hassle my new friends, so I ended up getting in an expensive hotel room. By US standards, this hotel room could have been easily $100 a night in a state like New York or California. In China, the currency is a lot different. I only spent $21 a night for HD TV, new bed sheets, huge shower room, $1 breakfast. It took me a few minutes to get used to the Chinese digital cable. I went out and got a new wallet, as well with all the money my tourist mates gave me each before they left. I also went shopping at a vitamin shop and got a discount card, which will come in handy later. You'll see why. If you made it this far into the story, this is where the sketchy part happens. It was late at night and one of my friends I've met in China knew I wanted a tattoo and told me about this cool spot to get inked up. He also told me to never go there without him. What do? I go without him. This place was an alley and locked very similar to a shopping center, but much smaller, if that makes sense. It was 2 floors and was off a decently busy street and had a lucrative look to it. The next day, I go around early evening and it's raining only a little bit. I enter the building, which has a lobby, and I'm greeted by a man with a suit and an earpiece. Keep in mind, I'm in mainland China, and this man didn't know any English, and I barely knew any Chinese. He looks at me and points me towards the front door. I insisted on staying and say, no, tattoo? As I shake my head, I show him my drawing, and he says something in Chinese with a look of satisfaction on his face and leads me upstairs. This room has about 5 people, including a lady with a tattoo gun. I sit down on the sofa to wait for my turn. Thankfully, the lady has little English, and we have a decent discussion, and I tell her my situation. As I'm in her chair, ready to get inked up, I'm finally led down a narrow hall with other doors into a tattoo parlor room, with my button-up shirt off and my short-sleeve white tee sleeve rolled up. 5 men in mostly dirty suits walk in the room and tell everyone something in Chinese, and they all leave. Except one put a stopping gesture with their hand and asked me to stay. Instantly, I knew something was up. I played it cool. Put my folded up tattoo sketch in my pocket, slowly put on my button-up shirt, and sat on the waiting sofa, which was faced towards the front door. One of them blocks the doorway, and one is to my left, and 3 are standing in front of me in a half circle. One of them had a mean-looking tattoo on his neck, and was decently built for a shorter than average person. They all stand to me with aggressive body language. Keep in mind, I'm 6'4" and a lean 220 pounds. These guys were at the most, maybe 5'11". The rest were shorter. They pull out their phone and it's this translation app. They start asking me for all my money and where I'm staying at. One of them told me through the app, which I had to read, to give them all my money, or else, or something along those lines. I pull out my wallet and they snatch all my cash, and still they hover over me like a bully scolding a victim on the playground. Obviously trying to intimidate me. They spot the corner of my discount membership card and tell me to give it to them. I used this moment to ask the man for his phone app, pretending I was agreeing with them. There was a weird, brief moment of intense silence as they stood over me like they were planning on jumping on me any second. They showed no signs of letting me leave. So, as soon as the guy looked down to grab his phone, my heart rushes. I get tunnel vision. I get up and tackle through them and through the front door. I feel one of them try to grab my shirt, but I use my elbow and shake him off as I hit him. The guy at the door fell into the wall behind him. I sprint down the hallway and hear people yelling in Chinese behind me as they chase me. Down the hallway, I see the double-handled door, chained and locked. Were they planning to keep me there? I didn't have time to think that. But I just instantly knew it when I seen those locked up doors. Next to the door was a fire escape, so I go out the window and onto the fire escape. Second floor, I climb down the ladder and reach the ground. I sprint down the alley and almost slipped in a few puddles, but eventually made it to the main street. I went to some public markets nearby and had no money on me, so I stole a new hat, shirt, and umbrella. I wanted to look as different as possible. I ended up walking around that evening to make sure I wasn't followed. As I walked around, lots of people would ask me for a photo. I'm 6'4", dark, and had Rasta dreads. A mixture you just never seen in mainland China. So I charged them 5 yuan for a photo. Eventually, I had a decent amount of cash, so I got a taxi and got back to the train station. Got back to my hotel room and took a shower. Went to my friend's house for dinner and told them the story. During that dinner, my friend told me that was a triad hangout, and that I could have easily been drugged and kidnapped. I was in the town of Foshan, China. This event happened in another nearby town. Creepy triad thugs. Let's not meet again.
My car broke down, and I was far away from home. I managed to get it to a garage, but the damage would take a day to fix, so I decided to stay in a hotel. It seemed like a reasonable hotel, and the rates were decent, so I thought, why not? I have nothing else to do. I sat down for something to eat, and it wasn't until I got to the reception office that I realized that most people here are coughing. The receptionist herself literally coughed at me as she gave me the keys to my room. I settled in nicely. I could hear coughs from the other rooms, and when I turned the telly on, it wasn't the usual channels that I watch at home, but all the actors and presenters themselves were coughing too. Now this is plain weird, I thought to myself, and I then came to realize that everyone is coughing. I could hear footsteps outside my room from people who were coughing. Then it all stopped, just like that. Now and then I would hear a cough, but it had all stopped instantly. Then, a moment of thought came to me. What if all the coughing is purposeful, like a language? What if they are not sick, but are talking to one another? I laughed to myself for a moment. Then a thought came to me about the silence, as all the coughs have stopped. What if they don't want me here, and are planning to attack me right now outside my room? I didn't want to go out, but I was curious at the same time. Then, I heard two people coughing, as if having a conversation. I started to cough as well, just to join in, not knowing what I'm saying. Like barking back at a dog to see what it'll do. The coughs became more aggressive, and I started to guess I might have offended them. People started coughing outside my room again. I decided to go out, and as I opened the door, it was dark. I started walking and accidentally bumped into figures in the dark. Then, the lights came back on, and the people looked different. They were not human, and I couldn't really describe what they looked like. It was as if they were wearing a mask that was connected to their skin. They all started coughing, and they all pointed to the door. I had a strong feeling they didn't like humans. As I went outside, I actually started getting a cough.
Back in 2012 when I was a senior in high school, I used to spend a lot of time at my best friend Colby's house. About 3 nights a week, we'd have some buddies get together for a night full of energy drinks and video games. One night, though, I ended up getting held up at my girlfriend's house after I told him I'd be there soon. Colby called and asked me to come over as soon as I could. I told him I would, but my girlfriend begged me to stay for another hour. After some deliberation, I decided to stick around for just a little longer before heading out. When I finally got out and I started to drive over, I gave Colby a call to see if anyone needed any snacks before I arrived. He didn't answer his phone. He was usually bad at answering his phone, so I just kept driving to his house. As I started to park in his driveway, right in front of the window kitchen, he called me back and I answered with my casual, "Hey dude, what's up?" Colby's voice was frantic. He said, "Are you at my house?" I said that I was and that I was walking to the door at that very moment. And then I heard a choir of voices shouting through the phone. I heard clips of, "Get the fuck out of there," and then, "There's someone in the house." My brain seemed to slow down. I was just starting to sense the danger at hand when I looked up into the kitchen window, and I saw 2 large men in all black quickly dash out of view. It clicked. "There's someone in your house," I yelled. I sprinted back to my door and got in my car, and I peeled out of the driveway. Colby and our 2 friends Brett and Corey told me to meet them down the street at Wendy's, and so I scurried over. We called the cops, and Colby's family, most of whom had been out dancing, were gone that night. The house was deserted and quiet. Nothing valuable was stolen, and the dogs were running around barking their heads off. Some shelves had been opened and doors were open, but other than that, everything was a-okay. Once things had settled down, I heard Colby's side of the story. Apparently, after he texted me, or called everyone to come over for the night, his 3 Pekingese dogs started freaking out. They started barking towards the front door, began whimpering, and peed all over the floor. Obviously, this wasn't normal, but Colby just cleaned up the mess and shrugged it off as the dogs spooked themselves. When he let the cat in about an hour and a half later, he saw two people crouched down by his family's RV on the side of the house. He thought it was Brett and Corey trying to play a joke on him, so he called them out and said, "Hey guys, I can see you. Stop acting like dicks." He went back inside and waited for them to just come in the house. A couple of minutes later, Brett and Corey pulled into the driveway. Colby ran outside to them and said, "Weren't you guys outside by my RV?" They looked at him funny for a second. No, we literally just got here." Colby freaked and screamed and said, "Go, go, go," and frantically pointed towards the car. They rushed into the car and drove to Wendy's. It wasn't until they realized that Colby still had me coming towards his house. I was very close to walking into a house and running into those guys. A number of variables could have potentially been me face to face with them if anything was changed. I was incredibly lucky my best friend checked his phone for once. So large burglar men, let's not meet.
This one's not as creepy as some other stories on here, but it's a creepy story nonetheless. When I was about 15, I went on a school trip to a neighboring country. We were staying in a quite nice hotel, with a 7-Eleven less than a half a mile walk away. My school was pretty loose, so the teachers allowed us to walk to the 7-Eleven whenever, just as long as we had another person with us. One night at about 9 p.m., my friend and I decided to go get some food. Side note, we are both girls. As we were walking there, a gold car, very recognizable, slowed down next to us. The windows rolled down to reveal 4 men, all about in their mid-20s, in army uniforms. They started catcalling and wolf whistling, and making us feel uncomfortable in general. We scoffed and kept walking, hoping they'd leave us alone. Eventually they drove off, but about 30 seconds later, they drove past us again, clearly having made a U-turn at the end of the road. This time their calls were a lot more creepy, saying that we were their type, and that it was going to be a fun night. My friend and I were only half a block from the 7-Eleven. Looking understandably panicked, we started browsing the store, but we were too freaked out to buy anything. We were just about to leave when we noticed headlights passing the store windows. We turned to the front door and saw the gold car slowly doing circles around the car park. My friend and I really started freaking out. At which point the clerk in the store noticed. He asked us if we were okay, and we explained the situation to him. He said he handled it, and went outside. We saw him lean into the gold car, and making hand motions as if telling them to go away. The gold car drove off, and we breathed a sigh of relief. We thanked the clerk and bought some food. Just as we were about to leave again, the clerk made a weird face at the door.
"Hang on a second,"
he said. The clerk walked out of the store far enough to just see around the corner. He came back in very calmly and asked us to follow him into the back of the store.
"Girls, I don't want to frighten you, but the car is parked around the corner, and only the driver is in it."
My friend and I asked what we should do, if we should call the police or something. But the clerk said that because the men were wearing military clothing, it was unlikely the police would be on our side. He said several girls in the city had gone missing in similar circumstances, and nothing was ever done. The clerk told us his car was parked around the back of the shop, and if we were quick, we could get in and drive off without being seen by the gold car. Immediately, I was skeptical about getting into a car with a stranger, but it was our only shot. We ran to the car, jumped in, and the clerk thankfully dropped us off safely at the hotel. We told the teachers what had happened, and after that, a rule was created that if we were leaving the hotel, it was in groups of 3, with at least one boy. We went back a few times afterwards to thank the clerk again, but only during the day.
I work for a large department store in my hometown in Eccles. I was sent there from a job center as unemployment is high where I live, and the range, where I work, is one of the biggest companies in my town. The hours are okay, and the customers are really nice. I'll be honest though that there are times where I don't feel like working there, and I just want to give up. But I carry on though, and my coworkers are also very nice. It was very busy and stressful my first month at the range, as it was nearing Christmas. It was a frantic experience, but I was happy with the work I did for the range. My first manager was Mary, who introduced me to the team. She showed me where everything went and encouraged me that I was going to be fine there. Mary was a very nice person. Actually, everyone there was nice. Don't get me wrong, they argue at times, but in a family kind of way. Then, all is forgotten and forgiven later on. Mary showed me the warehouse, including where the new pallets were prepared to go out into the store, and how the over pallets bring objects or goods back into the warehouse. Mary then called over a manager named Dave, who showed me how to move the pallets using a roller, which you roll under the pallet and pump it up, so it is raised above the ground. I got the hang of it pretty quickly. Mary gave me some advice, and the advice was, be careful, Sean. Try not to become too attached to your fellow coworkers. I mean, respect them and be nice to them, but be ready for constant newcomers every 6 months to a year or so. Yeah, okay, of course, I replied, feeling weird inside. I did struggle to put things where they were supposed to go. Another coworker, Tom, who was very nice, gave me some advice as he saw me struggling to put things in their place. Have you ever played Tetris? Tom asked me. Yes, I replied. Working here is like playing Tetris. It's just trying to make things fit in the neatest, most organized way possible. In this section, which is the homeware section, fit those plates next to those other plates, and just move those cups out of the way, and you'll have some space, Tom said. He was right. To work here was like Tetris. In each section, with the pallets that you have, you need to make your own space in the neatest and most presentable way possible. I did start to enjoy pallet work once I started having a Tetris sort of mindset. And I was constantly pricing, taking prices off, and putting on new ones. I was definitely busy. I was getting to know the team, and one person, another coworker Roy, was very stressed. He was always working in the textile section. His section, from my point of view, was overstacked, but he was stacking and finding spaces for it. The place was definitely like Tetris. All the cushions, bed duvets, and curtains were squashed to fit together. This guy was taking the Tetris mentality literally. Then, on one aisle of his, it became too much. Bedding and cushion cases all fell out of the aisle. Ron screamed out loud, "Ah, no!" And all the workers stopped working to look at him. He walked off, and the objects on the floor were taken into the warehouse. I never saw Ron after that. I also remember on the 3rd week of my work experience that some of the boxes I had opened had writing inside. What it had said was so weird. It was saying things like, "Please say to my parents that I love them, and I am going to miss all of you." And on the objects it had writing on it that said things like, "What is the purpose of life?" and "One day we will all die." That day, we had 5 customers who complained to us that the objects we delivered to them had very similar writing. It was so strange. We tried to say sorry, but we refunded them anyway. I had no idea who could have written such a thing on the boxes as well as on the objects. I assumed maybe it was the warehouse guys, but they only prepare the pallets. Everyone moved on pretty quickly, and it wasn't until I actually became a proper worker for the range that Ron had been replaced with a new worker. Cheryl looked like she was struggling in the Christmas section at the time, and I decided to help her. I swear to God though, when I looked at the shelves of Christmas stock all stuck together, the amount of objects should not have been able to fit on such a shelf. Things should have been falling out. There were so many things. How the objects were not falling out was beyond me. After that unusual experience with Cheryl, my shift ended and I was about to go home. Suddenly, Cheryl's Christmas section started falling off the shelves. Cheryl shouted, "No, no, oh God!" The next day, I came into the store and opened a new pallet for the textile section. On the boxes and cushions and duvets were weird, dark, and unusual messages. They said, "I hate all of you. I hate this place. I regret everything, but I guess in the end we all end up alone and regretting everything." We again had complaints from customers, and again we refunded them for the unusual messages they had received on their goods. I never saw Cheryl again. I did ask about her, but nobody knew anything. I managed to control my workload very nicely, and the managers were impressed with my work effort and my speed rate. Every shelf I stacked from the pallets was in the right section and department. At this point, I was at peace with the work I was doing, and everything was wonderful. Then, I got a pallet for a department that I already had done. I was feeling a bit worried about space issues, but with Tetris mentality, I was prepared to find some space. I moved some things carefully, trying to make as much space as possible, but then there was a point where I had thought things were going to fall. Thankfully, they didn't. On one of my breaks, I went to the break room and got a drink. My coworker Daryl was there. He must have guessed I had some questions about the weirdness of this place. "So, how are you finding it here, newbie?" Daryl asked me. "Yeah, I'm getting the hang of it," I replied. "It's been a rough couple of weeks. Lots of complaints, and 2 have gone from the workplace," Daryl told me. "Yeah, I was wondering about them. Where are they?" I asked Daryl. "Look, nobody likes to talk about it, but I might as well be the one to tell you. I'm sure by now you've been told working here is like playing Tetris. Well, it is Tetris, except for a few changes here and there, but it's Tetris alright. Like how the small shelves always seem to take more than they look. And you have to make sure that the same colors are all together in the same order, from king sizes to small sizes, and in the right department. And if you start messing up the orders of which things go where, it will mess up on you. Then you'll have to pay for it," Daryl told me. After talking with Daryl, I got thinking it was like I was in a Tetris playing field. In the game Tetris, once you get all the blocks at the bottom together, they disappear, right? I investigated this. I got a packet which had duvet cases and pillowcases in one plastic case. It was large and it was a purple color. I put in the right department with the right colors, but it seemed like it was going to be too much. Before I put it in, I saw 4 of the same products put there by another worker last weekend. When I managed to put it all in, I checked at the back, and the 4 products which were put there by another worker last weekend had all disappeared. Or, in other words, a Tetris had been formed and it had disappeared. What happens when too many pallets come through and too many products need to be shelved? The workers can make mistakes by putting in the wrong color section, wrong size section, or even wrong department, and thus overload. In a sense, it's like how in Tetris, when it reaches the top, you lose. This is how we lose in this Tetris playing field. Also, I don't want to know what happens to the workers who fail, as they clearly strangely disappear. And when the first 2 coworkers disappeared, the strange writing appeared on the boxes and on the objects. Maybe the game has taken them. This also explains why Roy and Cheryl were so frightened and stressed. At this point, I haven't messed up once, but I am scared of when the day will come when I will be like Cheryl and Roy.
When I was 19, almost 3 years ago, my best friend and I got our first apartment in a seemingly safe neighborhood. We would always sit out on the front patio smoking cigarettes and chatting about typical girl stuff. We're both night owls, so many nights we would be outside at 1 or 2 in the morning when the rest of the neighbors were asleep. Sometimes we would see this older man, maybe in his 50s or 60s, walk by, and we never thought anything of it. I figured he was a night owl like we were, and that he probably just took late night walks to relax and clear his mind. Unfortunately, I was wrong. Late one night, around 2 a.m, a friend comes over and we decided to sit outside my apartment building and smoke in his car. Everything is perfectly normal. We spend some time chatting and laughing. Suddenly, I see the older man walk by my apartment. We're on the first floor, I forgot to mention. He walks up the pathway to our unit and just stands there in the entrance for a couple of minutes. He then continues his walk around the apartment complex. I already had a bad feeling about it, so my friend and I sit and wait to see if he appears again. Surely enough, he took a lap around my building and comes to a stop at my unit again. My roommate is inside working on homework, and I begin to grow nervous that he's planning something. He repeats this process a couple more times. Our unit had a sliding glass door right in front, and he walks right up to the front door and begins trying to peek through the blinds and crane his head in closer to listen. My friend in the car suddenly pulls out a baseball bat, flips on his headlights, and opens the car door screaming, "What the fuck do you think you're doing?" The man, completely unaware that he was being watched the entire time, replies, This is my girlfriend's house," and bolts to his car, speeding off before I could make out a license plate number. Mind you, this man is in his 50s or 60s, and my roommate and I are both 19-year-old sophomores in college. I immediately called the police, filed a report, and went to sleep with every light on in the house. It's safe to say that paranoia took over for a while, and I always felt like I was being watched after that. The man was never found, and I had a feeling he lived in the apartment complex right next to mine. A few weeks later, I was getting home late from work around 11 p.m. and I see him walking toward my apartment. We were both equal distance from my front door. I scream, "Get the fuck out of here!" which immediately causes him to run off into the dark. I called and filed a second police report, but it did nothing. I have since moved quite a couple of times, and I have not seen any sign of the man since. It just terrifies me to think about what he might have been planning to do, and what he would have done if I had never caught him creeping around. Even worse, I looked up all the sex offenders with a 5-mile radius of my apartment, and a man who looks eerily similar to this guy was living only a couple of miles away.
This incident happened around 10 years ago, when I was 13 or 14 years old. It was unusually warm for my cold country, and my best friend and I, little rebels that we were, would lie to our parents about the time school ends and sit around in the school grounds gossiping and smoking cigarettes. Since we were idiot teenagers, we thought it was very cool to wear lots of makeup and heels in order to appear older. That day it was around 4 or 5 p.m., and we were sitting around as usual. Even though we were busy chatting, we noticed a strange man enter the school gate. He was tall, skinny, early or mid-20s, and nerdy looking. The guy was carrying a single red rose, and we quietly made fun of him as he entered the building. We continued with our business until the man exited the main building, rose still in hand, and came over to us. He asked if we knew some girl, who he claimed was his girlfriend. We said no, we haven't heard of her, which was strange in retrospect because we made it our business to know everyone and everything in school. The man did not walk away. He sat down on the bench next to us and started asking more questions. What we were doing here alone so late? What did we do for fun? Were we 18 yet? We started feeling less and less comfortable around him. He seemed a little off, unstable, like he could pounce at any second. He was especially fixated on my friend, which made sense because she was very tall, slim, and beautiful. So, after exchanging scared looks with her, we excused ourselves and left. While walking away from him, my friend noticed that he also got up and started following us, which scared us a lot. The feeling of immediate danger flooded my body, and we decided to hide. Now, the best move would have been to either go into the main building where there is a security guard at the reception desk, or leave the grounds and walk into a busier street. It would have been fine, but no, we went into an additional building. The building was part of the original school building and had nothing there except a staircase about 4 floors high and 2 locked classrooms. As soon as we went in, we knew it was a mistake. We climbed a few steps and wanted to turn around and run, but we heard the door open and close. The man was inside. He was quiet. Surely, he did not want to talk anymore. I was a little bit higher on the stairs, so I ran up, leaving my friend below. I was scared out of my mind and worried about my friend. I stopped for a second on the top of the stairs to gather my thoughts. Then I heard sounds of a struggle and my friend's muffled scream. I panicked. The man was taller and heavier than me. We were in an isolated building with no one there, and I had nothing that could be used as a weapon, but I had to do something. That's when I partly blacked out. I remember screaming, running, hitting, and my friend's scared expression. The man ran away. We left the building, thinking he may be outside, waiting, but he wasn't. We went into the main building, staying close to the security desk. My friend told me what happened. Apparently, I went crazy. I ran downstairs in my heels, swinging my heavy book bag over my head, screaming insults no one has ever heard before at him. I beat the man violently over the head and in the face with the bag. My friend said I had an angry, out-of-control, animalistic expression on my face. We recovered a bit and left home. We never called our parents or the police. No one ever knew this story until recently. I'm not sure why we never reported the rapist bastard. Maybe we were afraid that it was our fault for hanging out late, wearing makeup and smoking. If I had the sense I do now, I would report him to make sure he couldn't hurt anyone ever again, and I would not feel guilty because some perv thought we were 18, so naturally it was okay to rape us. So, creepy 20-something man who thinks it's okay to roam school grounds scouting for potential assault targets, fuck you. I wish I had hit you harder. Hey guys, thank you all for watching my video, and if you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that subscribe button and join the Nightmare Army. I'm always looking for new soldiers in my Nightmare Nation. Oh my god, so much editing. As always, I want to thank Ghastly Ghoul, HeroToVillain, Jessehavemercy, and Shutter Island. Thank you guys so much for joining me in my Collaboration Tuesday video, or Wednesday, or really late Tuesday, whatever you guys want to call it. But anyways, thank you guys so much for joining me in my video, and if you guys haven't, please check out the channels in this video. They're all really awesome, and I definitely think you guys will like them. Couple of other updates, and I apologize for talking in quick succession because it has been a crazy fucking day. I'm running around like a chicken with his head cut off between video games and just craziness all in general. If you guys know the YouTube channel or the YouTube horror channel, Darkness Prevails, he runs a website called darknessprevails.org where me, Blue Spooky, and Mr. Shivers all pretty much are now part of the website with him, and I want to thank him so much for that. So guys, if you haven't, please check out darknessprevails.org. He has a lot of really awesome stories on there, and his website is just amazing. And thank you, Darkness Prevails, for letting me join on your website. And I will leave a website in the description below for you guys to check out. So as always, guys, thank you all for watching, and just remember, the best ideas always come out of nightmares.